Show. I'm Adrian Healy. Big show on ESPN Plus today in the company of Steve Nicol and Shaka Hislop. We've got Julie Foudy joining us, talking a little US women's on and off the pitch. Herculez Gomez and what was a very bad night for MLS teams in the CONCACAF Champions League. And Sid Lowe momentarily, because we start with the coronavirus and the list of notable leagues impacted by the spread of the virus around Europe. Tuesday's UEFA Champions League games off in Turin and Manchester. La Liga have suspended the next 2 match days. The Real Madrid squad themselves currently in quarantine. Serie A, we already knew about this, suspended until April the 3rd. Daniel Rugani and Manolo Gabbiadini testing positive for the coronavirus. Eredivisie off for the next 2 match days. And a little earlier today, MLS suspending its season for the next 30 days. Sid, you're right there in Madrid. Let's start with you and get your perspective, particularly with those Real Madrid players in quarantine.
Yeah, what happened was that this morning it was confirmed that one of Real Madrid's basketball players, Trey Tompkins, had got the coronavirus. Real Madrid's basketball team had been in Milan last week. They played behind closed doors, but they did play. And in fact, obviously with hindsight, this has even more of an impact than it did at the time. Trey actually put out a tweet back then when he said, look, we need to take this virus seriously, and can we please do so? Why aren't we playing in the neutral venue? Well, he's come back from Milan. He does have the virus, and because he's tested positive, and because Real Madrid's basketball team trains at the same place as the football team, and indeed all of the youth teams, it's a centre of sporting excellence for the entire club. And so what the club did today was they sent all of the players home, they took all of the staff home, they even contacted the wives and husbands of some of the staff and got them back from their workplaces and sent them home as well. And Valdebebas, Real Madrid's training ground, is on total lockdown. It's totally closed up now. Those players are in quarantine. Of course, they've been sent home with training plans, but they are unable to train together. Now, that, of course, has been an extra factor in this conversation today between the Players' Union, the League and the Federation. The League wanted to play games behind closed doors. The Federation already wanted to actually postpone games. So did the Players' Union. And that has been the decision that's finally won out today. And the League will be stopped for at least 2 weeks. Yeah, that's the decision. It's different in different places, different leagues taking different courses of action. Do you think 2 weeks will be it? What's your suspicion at this stage? Well, look, I mean, obviously the starting point here is to say that I'm not a doctor, and it's very difficult to judge this. And of course, this has been put forward as being for at least 2 weeks, and within 10 days, maybe 2 weeks' time, they will start to re-evaluate and decide whether medical advice suggests that they can go back. Now, as you rightly say, there are different leagues saying different things, and that's one of the most kind of disconcerting elements about this, that the British government, for example, is saying that medical evidence and medical advice is suggesting there isn't a need to close games. The Spanish League has done it, the Italian League has done it. You've shown on the screen there a whole load of other leagues that have done it too. I must confess, my concern, or well, one of the many, many concerns I have, not least living here in Madrid, which is very much a hotspot within Spain, my concern with this is that we just don't know, and we don't know how long this will go on for. So we can talk about potential solutions, but those are solutions that at the moment we're grasping at without knowing what kind of margins there are, without knowing what kind of potential ways around this there are. And frankly, at the moment, I think it really is very much a case of seeing these 2 weeks out and then seeing where we're at. From the players' perspective, guys, we're starting to see players themselves getting quarantined, the whole Real Madrid team. If it was up to you, would you rather play behind closed doors or just be done with the season, finish it now?
If it were up to me as a player, I'd prefer to play behind closed doors. Yeah. You want to see the season out. That's just the kind of competitor, the professional in you. But kind of given what we know of the virus and certainly how contagious it is, you understand why health professionals take a different approach and see this differently from sporting professionals.
Stevie, what about you? Because it does change everything so dramatically.
What's the point of playing?
Yeah.
See the season out.
But you're putting yourself at risk by playing behind closed doors, because you're still dealing with the opposition. You don't know where they've been. They're dealing with you. There are staff that has to be at ground. So you're open to infection anyway. So what is the point?
From a player's perspective, the point is you see the season out and titles are awarded at the end of the season. To put things in perspective...
It's going to feel great, isn't it?
No, but to put things in perspective, should the Premier League just stop the season now and say, listen, we have no winner, The 4 who played in the Champions League. Right.
When you put that slide
exactly.
on, you know what's going to happen.
The 4 who played in the Champions League this
Play the
season.
games. I don't care. Behind closed doors, play the games.
We just can't.
Sid, maybe we could just put this in some sort of wider context. All roads seem to be leading to a big meeting on Tuesday. I don't know why, quite frankly, they're waiting till Tuesday to meet UEFA, but they are. UEFA bringing all the big leagues together. What do you expect from that meeting?
Well, look, it's very difficult to know what comes out of this meeting, but I must confess that what I expect, of course, is that there's going to be a lot of voices heard at that meeting, and a lot of those voices will say different things. You know, a lot of those voices will say, let's call it a day. A lot of voices will say, we want to get this season finished. There will be clubs saying lots of things. There will be national associations saying other things. There will be UEFA desperately trying to protect Euro 2020, which I think will be very difficult to do. There will be leagues saying, look at how much money we're losing. And the Spanish league, for example, this evening has made it known that they believe that if this was to be suspended now and the season not to be completed, that this could cost them 600 million euros. And it's a figure that they've justified in terms of what they lose in TV contracts and so on. But whether or not that's really the case, of course, we don't know. And this is going to have a huge impact across economies well beyond football. So I think what will probably happen in that meeting is that there will be a whole load of contrasting ideas put forward. And then I don't know where UEFA take it now, because, of course, as we're saying, we have a problem, or we have lots of problems, but one of them is that we don't know if this isolation period will be sufficient. So in other words, if you could say for certain, look, it's 2 weeks, and then we can start up again, then you can say, right, well, we can move this and we can shift that around and we can get these games played in these dates and we can hold it off and we can play these games in front of full stadiums as usual. And yes, it won't be great, but it'll be like it always is when there's weather problems or whatever, and we play the games in hand and we get it done. But of course, if you don't know whether you've got 2 weeks and you think, well, maybe we've got 4 weeks or 6 or 8 or who knows how many weeks. And then you say, and anyway, as we start to creep into the summer, we've got the European Championships in a way. So I think the starting point, probably in terms of giving yourself the chance at least to fulfil all those kind of competitive duties, if you like, the starting point probably has to be moving the European Championships out the way to make space for everything else. And I just don't know how willing and how able the footballing authorities are going to be to take that on.
That will be a big call, won't it, for UEFA, but potentially moving it to the following summer. Much more immediately said, lastly for you on this, the Barcelona game next week in the Champions League is still taking place behind closed doors against Napoli. Are you surprised, and do you think that might yet change?
Well, that's the thing. I was just going to look at my watch then and say, what time is it? Spanish time. It's coming towards 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday night. I must confess, I find it very hard to imagine that this doesn't get changed in some way. Bear in mind that there are now blocks on flights from Italy into Spain. So, for example, even if we strip it right down to the basics, how do Barcelona's opponents get here? How does that happen? Unless there's some sort of special dispensation put in place, whether there's some sort of controls that enable them to do this. And so I must confess, while I realise it doesn't really answer your question, there's a bit of me that thinks, it might well be that that's not the question. It might well be that that's simply not the case. And this is one of the problems, of course, is that every time you start to deal with some of the elements, things are changing in a matter of minutes, let alone a matter of days. And as I say, it's a Thursday night. That game's not until next week. My guess is that this game doesn't take place.
Yeah, it is a long time to go. Great stuff, as always, Sid. If you ever miss an edition of the show, the podcast is where you can hear the audio version. Now, results of the Europa League games that were played, round of 16, first leg. Remember, a couple of postponements in Seville and Milan. Basel winning at Eintracht Frankfurt, big surprise perhaps, 1-1. Wolves going to Greece, getting a draw behind closed doors against Olympiacos. Bayer Leverkusen in front of a full house at Ibrox, getting a 3-1 win. Wolfsburg losing at home. The other result, an eye-catching one. Manchester United going to Austria and Linz and winning by 5 goals to 0. Again, behind closed doors. Goals from Agallo, James, Juan Mata, Mason Greenwood. Andres Pereira even getting in on the act. And it continues for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side. Stevie, were you impressed?
You have to be. You listen, you can only beat what's put in front of you. And even though you win a game, there could be a lot of things you can improve on. But you got to say, in this game, they did a bit of everything. You know, clean sheet means they defended well. They scored goals. They scored good team goals. They scored good individual goals. A lot of good movement. They attacked a lot, which is something that certainly I criticised them for against City at the weekend.
Yeah.
So you have to say this was a great performance from Manchester United.
And getting the ball rolling once again, Shaka, was Ogalo, who's continuing to do the business.
Fantastically well. And every time you see him play now, the goals seem to be special, albeit against less opposition. Now, the cynic can say similarly about Manchester United and last year is that this is a game they'd expect to win. And you scored 2 in injury time, which maybe makes it seem a little bit more one-sided than, 3-0 quite clearly suggests. But as Stevie says, this was a thorough and complete performance by Manchester United, deserving of the win. On the back of the run that they're on, this is what, now 12 unbeaten in all competitions, it puts this team in a whole different mindset. For them personally, from what we've seen earlier in the season, for all the criticism they've endured, for all the questions we asked about the signing of Igalo, it's coming right. And again, you can start to pick holes about Igalo and where and when and against who he scores his goals, but you can't question the technique in scoring those goals, and that I think between now and the end of the season, he very well will play a big role for Manchester United as they continue to look at securing a top 4 spot.
They're pretty much, I think we can safely say, into the quarterfinal. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the Europa League reaching a conclusion, but if they do carry on playing it, are United well equipped to win this? They're probably amongst the favourites to win it now.
Oh, no question they're one of the favourites to win it.
Yeah.
I would go as far to say as maybe Wolves and Manchester United, for me, are the 2 teams that I think are the favourites in this. So
Leverkusen might have something to say about it.
You think so?
Anyway,
the thing is, you can see by the team that he put out tonight that he wants to win this because he knows that there's no guarantee. Right now they're sitting, if Manchester City get banned, then they're in.
Right.
But he knows that can go, there's no guarantees. So he knows he has to try and win this. And whilst they're one of the favourites, you should put out your strongest team and go and win it and make sure.
There's only 3 points between Manchester United and Chelsea, as we said, and we've spoken about Chelsea's inconsistency. But winning is a habit. And when you've kind of endured the form that Manchester United had to earlier in the season, when you find yourself in this kind of form, you understand fully why Solskjaer pulls out his strongest team every time he can, and he's going for a win, as big a win as he can get, regardless of who that opposition is. And if you continue to get the kind of performances that you've seen from Igalo, that Bruno Fernandes continues to churn out week in, week out, keep that going. Don't mess with that formula.
The thing is, well, if they do keep winning, it's going to hurt them in the Premier League, so he has to make sure.
Yeah, well, they won it, didn't they, under Jose Mourinho a few years ago, and that kind of defined that United season. And guess what? They have Jose Mourinho and Spurs to come.
I think the U.S. team's going to be pleased. I mean, this was really the first test for new coach Vlatko Andonovski. And it's always an excellent test because it basically simulates what the Olympics will look like in terms of rhythm, in terms of competitive level. And their first game against England, they looked a class above England. Second game against Spain, although Spain was excellent, they pull out the 3 points with a Julie Ertz game winner. And then probably not their best game against Japan, but again, they're so good on the finishing end. When you saw the Pino goal, when you saw the press goal, as you all commented, she's been excellent in Olympic qualifiers and in She Believes Cup. So I think they're going to be pleased. I mean, they know they've got a lot to build on, but it's a great stride for them heading into that last, 4-month phase of the Olympic preparation.
So, Jules, what happened on the field was great. What happened off it, distinctly uglier. Let's get into that. Lawyers from the US Soccer Federation, in reaction to the gender discrimination lawsuit filed by the 28 players back in March, saying this: opposing fan hostility encountered in these men's national team road environments, especially in Mexico and Central America, is unmatched by anything the women must face while trying to qualify for an important tournament. The lawyers went on to say the women claim their ability level is the same as the men by ignoring the materially higher level of speed and strength required to perform the job of a men's national team. These are the US soccer lawyers who, Jules, were basically asked to prove the men's game is different to the women's game, weren't they, in court? What do you make of how they've gone about doing this?
Well, I don't think it's breaking news that, you know, we're biologically made different. But to make that the central theme of your 2,600, mind you, Adrian, page document that was the response when they had to file these summary motions. I mean, 2,600 pages of that being a theme where they're deposing the players, asking them, you know, but you lose to 15 and 16-year-olds. Could you beat any men's national teams? You know, the men's World Cup brings in so much more revenue and attendance. And, you know, when Kelly O'Hara was asked that, she said, well, you know, I think it's also because they've been marketing the men's World Cup for a long time, and they've been investing in that market for a very long time. So it's the absolute wrong approach. And the question I have when I'm reading through all this stuff is, there had to have been someone at U.S. Soccer who saw this was the approach their lawyers were taking. And how did that someone, and if that's Carlos Cordero, the president, we've got major issues, right? That he doesn't see a problem in that. Or if it's even Lydia, who's the woman who runs who's their general counsel, she's their in-house general counsel. How do you argue that is going to be our central earth-scorching theme, and we're going to run with this? Because obviously what you see here is it doesn't play well with the players, of course, doesn't play well with the sponsors. Public sentiment is terrible in terms of any affection they had for U.S. Soccer. It's gone. So I don't know how you miss that in such a big way.
Well, as you say, Julie, the reaction has been furious, hasn't it? And it prompted Carlos Cordero to respond almost immediately, putting out this statement on behalf of US Soccer. I sincerely apologise for the offence and pain caused by the language in this week's court filing, which did not reflect the values of our federation or our tremendous admiration of our women's national team. The horse had already bolted, Jules. What do you make of it? And what might the repercussions be, do you think?
Well, we actually were texted that statement when we were live on television last night. And Sebastian, I had not seen the statement. It came on Sebastian's phone, and we read it towards the almost 90-minute, it may have even been the 91st minute of the game. And Sebastian is reading it live on air, and we just reacted live to it. And what I said last night and what I'll say again is, I mean, really? It's like it's too little, too late. There's 2,600 pages of that out there. And again, it's not like the players just got deposed this week and you didn't see it. This deposition process and this whole summary process has been a 4-month process. So who in the room was looking at the approach that their lawyers were taking and knowing it's so sensitive? U.S. Soccer so badly wants to sit at the table and settle and not go to trial in May. And so wouldn't you have eyes on that, tracking, saying, where are we with this? What is our argument? How are we handling this? How are we looking coming out of this? And none of that was done at the board level, is my understanding, nor with Carlos Cordero.
Jules, just finally, bottom line, there's been a lot of suggestions that perhaps Carlos Cordero should step aside after this huge misstep. Should he stay in this role?
I think it's going to be really hard for him to stay in this role. I don't see how you go forward after this, because you've lost the players. You've lost the public support. You've lost the support around you. If I'm a board member and I sit on that U.S. Soccer board and I'm reading this brief, or a member of U.S. Soccer that's employed by U.S. Soccer, and I'm reading these briefs, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And whether it was his fault in terms of maybe he hadn't been shown what their approach was, well, I would still argue you're the president. You should know these things. How can you not be actively engaged in that? And the real problem as well is there's no CEO position right now. They haven't been able to fill that, but I still think it all falls on his shoulders for all his good intentions, because I do think he has had moments of very good intentions. He hasn't been able to be the leader we need to settle all of this.
Jules, thanks ever so much for hopping on at short notice. I know you just got back from Frisco. We will continue to monitor this story very closely, of course, in the coming weeks. There won't be too many games to look at from a US soccer perspective. Forthcoming friendlies cancelled on the men's and women's side. For the men, their trips to the Netherlands. About the way Atletico went about playing. Is it a case of being a sore loser? Does it matter if he's a sore loser? Do you want your manager to be a sore loser, Stevie?
Well, of course you do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he's telling the truth. You know, listen, these two teams have spent the same, 300 million euros in the last 2 years. Both teams have spent the same money in 2 years. But look how one team plays and look how the other team plays. And you could say, well, the way Liverpool went about it at Anfield, any team would have to sit because they were forced back. But they did the same at home. At home, they did exactly the same. That tells you that that's the way this team plays. So if you want the truth, you heard the truth from Klopp. You get people behind the ball.
Is it anti-football, Xhaka?
Yeah, it is. But it has been for quite some time from Atletico Madrid. This should come as absolutely no surprise to anybody. And listen, I totally understand Steve's point. He's right. When you spend the kind of money that both these clubs do, you expect a certain style of football. The issue for Atletico Madrid is who their manager is. It's one thing to ask Jurgen Klopp to get his team playing a certain way. It's another to ask Diego Simeone. He simply can't do it. That's not who he was as a player. It's not who he has been as a manager. He's tried to change this Atleti team to make them more appealing on the eye, but we saw how their season started. They couldn't get the balance right. They couldn't score goals as they were doing in pre-season and keep clean sheets, as they've been doing over the last few years, especially with wholesale changes to what had become their established back four. So as much as Jurgen Klopp might complain, as much as he might be right, he wasn't, or he shouldn't have been surprised.
Meanwhile, on British television, Liverpool legend Michael Owen, actually this was a tweet he put out, please spare me all this inevitable Simeone masterclass nonsense. There's nothing genius about putting 11 top-class footballers behind the ball. Liverpool absolutely pumped them throughout. Sid Lowe is with us. Sid, was it a Simeone masterclass? And what's the reaction been like in Spain and in Madrid?
It's so difficult to know where to start because I think there are so many different elements to pick up on here. And I feel like I should start with what Xhaka was talking about, and I think he's quite right. This has been the debate at Atletico Madrid this year and indeed last year and perhaps even the year before about identity, about style, about what it is you expect from a team that is now spending the kind of money that maybe means that you can demand a different style of football. My problem, I think, with what Klopp said was the use of the word proper. I wouldn't have minded, I don't think, if he'd said, you know, they're not the kind of football I like, or they're very defensive, or they got very lucky. I wouldn't have minded those things, not least immediately after a defeat. And I'm very indulgent of managers and players post-game because there's a bit of me that thinks that from the outside, it's easy for us to ask them to be perfect and say the right thing. But they're frustrated, they're angry, they're upset, they've given everything and they've been beaten. And so I think a kind of a bad reaction is sort of normal. But as I say, it's that word proper. And I don't think you can dismiss a way of playing as being, if you like, ethically wrong or not real football. It's a different type of football and you can like it less, but I'm not sure it's fair to dismiss it entirely. Also, the other thing, and to pick up specifically what Michael Owen says, I think Michael Owen has kind of got a point. I'm not sure if it's expressed quite the right way, but I think he's kind of got a point when he says, please spare me this talk of it being a masterclass. There is a small problem with that, though, seen from a Spanish point of view at least, which is that nobody is really calling this a masterclass here. Nobody is saying that Atletico Madrid did this fantastic tactical job on Liverpool in the second leg. And I think it's worth pointing out that the two legs were different. Although there were some stylistic similarities, they were different in terms of the way they were played out. Everybody in Spain, including the Spanish media, that of course is celebrating Atletico Madrid going through, is seeing this as a miracle. They're seeing this as partly fortunate. All of the Spanish media today have all said, wow, Liverpool were brilliant. You know, this was genuinely a good performance from Liverpool. We're amazed that this has happened. So it hasn't really been framed in those terms that Owen is talking about.
It actually was a masterclass, but it was a masterclass of goalkeeping from Oblak. That's what it was.
And let me tell you, for Stevie to say that, you know exactly how good Jan Oblak was.
That's what it was.
Here's my thing. As far as the criticism around Diego Simeone, Atletico Madrid, and to the point that Michael Owen is making or trying to make, I have no problem with you not liking Simeone or their style of football. I have no problem with you criticizing it. But be consistent. Don't talk about anti-football with Atletico Madrid and Diego Simeone and then turn around and praise Jose Mourinho when he does exactly the same with more money. Don't talk about he's a tactical genius when he parks the bus as well as anybody in football and wrote the blueprint and then turn around and criticize Diego Simeone. Be consistent. Whatever you're doing, that's all I ask.
What's your feelings on Adrian, briefly, Shaka? Because he was a cult hero at West Ham.
Yeah.
But you can't have two quality goalkeepers at the same club, can you? You just can't. Well, not many teams do.
They don't, will be the argument. Listen, the trouble is, I know you're right. Adrian was absolutely fantastic for West Ham. But this is a step up and a showing. For those who think that just stick any player in goal, it's the same regardless of where you are, it shows when you step up in class and the expectation and how that pressure tells on ordinarily very good goalkeepers.
You got to wonder. Adrian started the season for Liverpool, and Adrian didn't look out of place at the start of the season.
No,
He had a run of games, and we're certainly, I know I was. I'm thinking, wow, this guy's been fantastic. I can't believe it. Now we've got two. If something happens to Alisson, now we've got a guy who can step in.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he stepped in and
stepped
twice.
Right in it. That's where he stepped.
Both games made an absolute mess of it and cost Liverpool maybe a Champions League.
I've said this before. It's a totally different mentality to being a number two than being a number one.
Right.
And expectation and what you can deliver yourself. And you're seeing that from Adrian. The step up in pressure, and I don't think he's ready to play at that level. I don't think he's ready to be a number two yet either.
So to turn it back to Madrid, Atleti, we're having a pretty torrid campaign by their recent standards in the league, in La Liga. So getting through this tie at Anfield, what might it mean for them, big picture?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it really is. Look, anyone beating the current champions, anyone beating a team that Simeone has already said will go down in history as one of the great teams, because he believes this is a team with more variety, with more different ways of getting at you than previously really great teams right the way through history. That would be huge anyway. But as you rightly so say, this is an Atletico Madrid team that right now isn't in a Champions League place, that season isn't convincing at all. In a season where Madrid and Barcelona have been poor and maybe there was an opportunity to win the league and they've allowed that to slip away from them, this is huge. And now, of course, people are looking at this and saying, well, if they knocked out Liverpool, there are only 4 games to go to a final now. This is not impossible.
Indeed. Well, no La Liga games, as we already talked about, for the next 2 weeks. There are Premier League games, though. As we sit here and speak, we'll preview Spurs United and Everton Liverpool. No problems with it, though. Shaka, your power rankings, the first coronavirus edition of the power rankings.
Yes. And the way things are going, this might be the very last power rankings of this season. So Bayern will be happy. Lazio don't even have to play, and they stay second. And then Champions League kind of dictates the rest.
You always...
Notably, Atletico Madrid in at 7th. Liverpool at 8th. Leipzig, all right, doing all right. They're happy. And Leverkusen, they're in. They're doing very well, Leverkusen. I mean, I know it's just Rangers in Europa League, but they're playing well.
I don't know what to make of this.
It's fantastic, Steve. That's what to make of it.
I don't like the look of Atleti ahead of Liverpool.
Yeah.
Well, if only we had some, if only we had some way to choose between the two, Stephen.
Liverpool plummeting faster than the stock market in your
unbelievable
in your power rankings.
They were number 1, what, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Breaking news, actually, just as we finished today, Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal manager, has tested positive for coronavirus. But as far as we know, the Premier League games are still happening this weekend. That could all change by the time we do our next show. We hope you will join us for that. Thanks to Stevie and to Shaka and also to Sid. See you next time. And away we go. Another edition of Extra Time. Thanks for your questions, your tweets. A lot of them.
I like he always weaves his papers with another edition of Extra Time right here.
I'd just like to show the list of people think make it up. Well, a lot of them were for you yesterday, weren't they?
It really is Extra Time, though.
And the first one's for you today as well. Christina just wants to check in.
Hi.
Says, is Stevie doing a little better today, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah? 24 hours cures all ills.
Yeah, listen, whether you're playing or coaching or a fan, it's always a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And you can't hold on to it for too long.
Right.
You got to let it go.
I have to admit, yesterday I was watching the game. I was really concerned, Stevie. I was.
What, during the game?
Yeah.
I wish I could have
I've seen Stevie watching games. I'm not just for I'm concerned not just for Stevie, but for everybody in ESPN.
Right.
Because
Yeah. There's a special shade of purple he turns when things aren't going Liverpool's way.
He has to, in keeping with recent themes, he has to self-isolate when Liverpool are playing.
Sid Lowe is with us. Sid, Rafael Santiago wants to know how far Atleti going in the Champions League after knocking out the reigning champions.
Well, I don't know if there will be a Champions League now, but which is obviously a potential problem. I mean, genuinely, having knocked out Liverpool, I think Liverpool are the kind of. I know this sounds ridiculous because Liverpool are the best side in Europe almost certainly at the moment. They have a variety to their play, but I think Liverpool's style does perhaps offer Atletico a way of resisting that would be more difficult for them against other types of teams. But look, this is a team that reached 2 finals, right? It's not quite as good as that team that reached 2 finals, but I think this is a slightly weaker Champions League than the one in which they reached 2 finals. And in those 2 occasions, remember, they knocked out Barcelona in one of them, they knocked out Bayern Munich in one of them. I think Atletico are good enough to reach the final again.
Yeah.
Where, of course, they will be desperate not to face Real Madrid.
Yes.
Or Ronaldo, more to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Stevie? I mean, as Sid says, it's in their DNA. They've done it plenty of times before.
Well, you can't say no.
Right.
If you just beat the best team, then clearly you've got a chance of winning a tournament. I would suggest, though. I would love to know what the bookies have got them at, because regardless of beating Liverpool, I don't think they'll be any further up the table when the bookies order.
Here's my totally non-scientific prediction.
Hold on, are we talking about Xhaka's power ranking?
No.
I thought that
European football is going to be scrapped.
Right.
There's going to be no more European football. And then domestic leagues, certainly the Premier League at the very least, are going to cram everything into a few weeks, 2, maybe 3 games a week behind closed doors to get to the end of a season.
Yeah. And
that's my prediction.
Euro 2020? Does that still happen?
No, that's out.
That's gone?
Yeah, that's out.
So when are they going to play these games in the domestic?
2 or 3 times a week.
They're going
to take a week or 2 break. They're going to take a week or 2 break, cram everything, including the FA Cup in.
Yeah, but if the Euros don't start till what, June?
June 12th.
Yeah.
Okay, the Euros. Yeah.
Well, if they're going to play games before then, why would you not just go ahead and have the Euros?
No, because the Euros is all over Europe. And they don't want people, there's still travel restrictions.
All the domestic season could be by then if they play 2 or 3 games a week. So why would you not play the Euros?
Because you don't want people travelling around Europe. You want people staying in their countries.
We'll play the Euros behind closed doors as well.
You have teams flying all over Europe. Move on, Adrian, please.
Yeah, all right. Flexmaster. Let's move to him. Who was the better January signing, Bruno Fernandes or Erling Haaland?
Ooh.
Maybe the answer has changed a little over the last couple of weeks. It would have been.
It has. I'm going to go Bruno Fernandes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because Dortmund were a good team.
Yeah.
They're better with Haaland. I'm not so sure you could say the same about Manchester United pre-Bruno Fernandes.
Stevie?
Oh, it's no contest. Bruno Fernandes.
Not even a contest. Yeah.
Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah. Sid? Is it as clear-cut in your mind, Bruno Fernandes?
Well, I say this as someone who's not watching English or German football with as closely as you two are in the studio. But I think the impact on Man United, and I think that's a very compelling argument, that one that says, Borussia Dortmund weren't a bad team before. Manchester United were. And so I suppose in that sense you'd say the impact is greater. Although it must be said that while Borussia Dortmund weren't a bad team, things weren't right. And I suspect that long-term, both of these players are going to be very good indeed. That was sitting on the fence, wasn't it?
I thought that was very good. No, I thought that was very good, Sydney.
If you're going to sit on the fence, that was expertly done. That was a textbook demonstration of sitting on the fence. Dave, meanwhile, for Stevie again, why has Roberto Firmino evaded criticism this season for his lack of goals, specifically at Anfield? Asked Dave.
Because they're winning.
Yeah. That would do it, wouldn't it?
Winning is the deodorant of the game. Because it covers all bad smells. Always remember that.
The deodorant of the game.
Yeah, winning is the deodorant of the game. Covers all bad smells. Winning covers a lot of bad things. Tell you what, you could say that Salah. Salah's form this season. Is there a more? Is there a guy that frustrates you more in the Premier League or anywhere else with the things he does in a game, and then all of a sudden he'll produce something? So you could say the same about him as well. But again, he plays every game, and why? Because they win.
What he said.
Yeah. What about the deodorant?
Yeah.
John, finally for Sid, he's concerned what you're going to be doing now that La Liga is suspended for the next 2 weeks. John wants your itinerary.
Yeah, I'm concerned about this as well. I worked it out the other day, just before the Valencia game was put behind closed doors, that I think I've been to 125 games this season. Wow. Which tells you obviously what a big part of my life going to football matches takes up. I have no idea what I'm going to do now. I mean, I suppose I might have to interact with people, but of course the whole point of this coronavirus lockdown is you're not supposed to interact with people. So I might have to talk to my family. I don't know what. I mean, it's awful.
Sid.
I mean, I'd like to point out here. I say it's awful. It's awful for them, not for me.
Right.
Sid. Your maths is going to be fantastic by the end of this.
Yeah. Oh, no, honestly.
Because you're going to be doing homework every day.
Schools are closed, kids are at home, I've become a teacher, and I've realised that I'm not very good at some of these things that I'm supposed to be helping with. I'm climbing the walls already, and I'm not taking a huge amount of responsibility for this teaching work, but even just an hour of it, and
This newfangled maths, Sid, I tell you. You claimed you weren't a doctor earlier, but actually you are. You're a doctor of history, aren't you, Sid?
Yeah, so I can't really help you with any viruses. I mean, if your ailment involves wanting to know why the Spanish Civil War started, I can help out. But if it's anything remotely practical, I'm not a lot of use to you.
It says a historian, right? How did they sort out the Spanish flu way back in the day?
1918.
Well, I mean,
1918, right?
No.
Yep. See.
Yeah, I think Steve. Part of the problem is that they didn't, and actually maybe here is a lesson from history. Perhaps we haven't learned some of the things that we could have learned from that.
Oh, that's a first.
Every 100 years.
We learned from history.
That's my contribution to today's history lesson.
The Spanish railways are going to be in some trouble without Sid's patronage.
No, they won't. They'll miss the train.
Tell you who's going to be in some trouble.
Kept them in business over the last.
Mrs. Lowe is going to be in all kinds of trouble. It's like, oh, what am I going to do now with him or him only hanging around?
Pray for Mrs. Lowe, honestly.
We will be back tomorrow. We do.